Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours. Fair warning, I have had entirely too much coffee today. Not a little bit too much, entirely too much, to the point where it's like I'm vibrating. I have an espresso machine at home, and I made two large cups of coffee. And then when my favorite coffee shop opens up around 6 a.m. Near me. When that opened up, I went over there and had a pour over, and whatever they did to the pour over too was even more caffeinated than usual. I normally I would never do three of those. I would never do two coffees at my house. I feel like I'm talking even faster than regular. Plus the pour over, but it just so happened that I forgot I'd had the second large cup of coffee. So today should be extremely energetic. Today is also, yes, Morse says. Today is also the last live office hours of the summer. Oh, I know. Isn't that terrible? Because on Sunday I go take a drive through Iceland for like 4 days. Then I fly to Sweden. I'm there for Data Saturday Gothenburg. Then take a train over across to Oslo. I do Data Saturday Oslo there as well. And then take a cruise up through the coast of Norway for a week. It's a trip that I'd originally planned for back in September 2020, but then, of course, the pandemic happened. So that's how that happened. Anyway, I'll be gone for like 3 weeks. I will still record office hours videos on location, like I used to do when I was living in Iceland. I'll record them on location. I'm bringing camera gear with me. I've got a drone that I've had sitting on my. It's like a cheap Chinese drone that I got off Amazon for like $200. I've even got a drone that I've never taken out of the box. That's not true. I took it out once and flew it around the house, and I was like, boy, I really suck at flying drones. I'm going to see if I can get it to hover over the car as I drive through parts of Iceland, because I think that'd make for some kind of fun videos. But then I'll be posting those on my YouTube channel too as well, so that y'all can see the recordings of office hours in unusual places. You'll also notice if you've been here a while that there's a slightly different video format, that I don't have the questions right underneath me anymore. That's because when Eve does the editing for videos, Eve now puts the live translations of whatever it is that I'm saying, captions and translations. We do English and Spanish directly on the screen, so then that way people can see it. Thank you, D. Sanchez, for renewing with Prime 6 months. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's go take a look. Let's see what questions y'all have. Now, the first question, it's a me, Mario asks, is there a feature in SQL that Microsoft abandoned that you wish they'd perfected? Now, I actually look at these questions before we go live just to make sure that there's nothing like offensive in the top five. Of course, all kinds of things can come in. The Kazakh says, "Hi Brent, Twitch chat is disabled, icons only mode." I don't. That's odd. Let me go fix that. Let's see here. Let's see if I can change that really easy. Chat settings. Emotes only chat. Okay, there we go. Let's turn that off. Oh, and it was on subscribers only chat too. Let me get rid of that. Just so then that way. Okay, there we go. Cheeton says, "Good morning, buzzing Brent." There we go. Okay, so back to the first question. So It's Me says, is there a feature in SQL that Microsoft abandoned that you wish they would have perfected? So I glance at these questions before the session starts just because I want to make sure there's nothing like offensive in the top five. And this one, when I glanced at it, I happened to have a feature in mind because somebody had asked about it in a prior office hours. So I got an answer right off the top of my head. It might not be my number one answer, but the answer is stretch tables. Stretch tables would let you put the archives of a table over somewhere else, like the cloud in Azure SQL DB. The idea being that because for years, we've struggled with how do we archive data out of production. This would be a really elegant way to do it, put it off somewhere cheaper, except there was a huge problem with it. It wasn't cheaper. It was more expensive. The pricing on it was terrible. The pricing on it was utterly ridiculous. And so as a result, no one adopted it. The support for it has been removed out of Management Studio 19, so it's pretty much walking dead. That's a shame. I think if they would have priced it appropriately, I think they would have gotten a heck of a lot of adoption. But at the same time, I would never want Microsoft to lose money on a feature. So if it truly costs them that much to host, then I get it. But that's one that I think really would have made a difference in production DBA's lives. It's not to say that it was good. It also had all kinds of interesting problems, but it was a version 1, and you kind of expect Microsoft to continue to work on that. They're just not going to work on it because the thing never got adopted because marketing priced it too high. Next up, the Everyday DBA says, got SP Blitz Index that's got quite a lot of missing indexes that are triggered. Does SP Blitz Index look for column store indexes when it runs? That really has two parts to the question. Does SP Blitz Index look at column store indexes? Yes. Does it recommend column store indexes? No, because the missing indexes that SP Blitz Index has are based off of SQL Server's built-in missing index DMVs, which only recommend non-clustered row store indexes. They don't recommend XML indexes, spatial, column store, anything like that, just plain old row store indexes. Yet another question kind of hinted at inside there is, are there times when you should use row store indexes on top of column store? And that answer is also yes. I talk a little bit about that in my Fundamentals of Column Store class. Thanks, Drop Table employees, for the subscription there on Amazon Prime. Appreciate that. That's very cool. Hola, Shane, as well. Let's see, what do we got next here? Oh, Renegade Larson, who's in chat today, says, hi, Brent, any plans on going to SQL Bits next year? If I can get to it, yes. The problem with SQL Bits is that they don't announce it until like very last minute in terms of conferences. They don't give you a real long heads up. Because I usually plan my travel like 3 to 6 months in advance at the very least, often 6 to 12 months in advance, it's really hard for me to accommodate last minute changes in the schedule when clients have already booked me out for certain weeks of the year. So if I can get there, yes, and as long as it's in a reasonably interesting place to be. Slothman says, I hear it's in London next year. I've heard suggestions of that as well. I love London. I love Fortnum and Masons. I love Gordon Ramsay. I love the whole royal family and museums kind of thing. I think it's delightful. So I would love to go back to London. It just has to make sure that the dates work for me. As long as the dates work, I'm in. Next up, Brent is my hero. Oh, you need better heroes. Says, can you please recommend your top 3 books for a production DBA role? Yes, and I've already written them up too. Go to brentozar.com/go/books. brentozar.com/go/books. Alpha Cronus says, Ozar versus Ramsey in a sarcasm fight. I would love to just watch Gordon Ramsay in person rip me apart in person. He's just, I love the guy to death. He's amazing. Plus, he's a Ferrari collector, and so I love that as well. Moore says, I'm flying to London tomorrow. Any recommendations? Number 1 by far, Fortnum and Mason. Fortnum and Mason afternoon tea service is delightful. It's so civilized. Fortnum and Mason, especially their main location, and I don't know the name for it, but is just completely delightful. It will make you understand a lot about Britain, about the United Kingdom. Default Blame Acceptor says the Postal Museum was fantastic. I would also recommend Winston Churchill's bunkers. There was a set of bunkers where he worked during World War II. That's also really interesting. But there's so much. I mean, London's just fantastic. Next up, Ask Me says, I've been a SQL Server DBA for 15 years and I've dabbled in other platforms. My company's moving most of their databases to IBM LUW. I've never even heard of that. Honest to God, I don't even know what that is. And MariaDB. I'm half interested in learning more about them, but not sure that it is a career building positive for me. What would you do? Great question. Go to career sites, go to wherever you would apply for a job and search for those terms. Search for IBM LUW DBA. See how many positions there are open. If there aren't many, that's your answer. Don't let the fact that I've never heard of it stop you, because I spend doing most of my work in SQL Server and Postgres, so I'm sure there are other databases that are popular. I've just never even heard of that one. Next up, Ozan says, "Hi Brent, do you recommend performing snapshot?" Or no, he says, "Hi Brent, you recommend performing snapshot backups if the database is greater than 1 TB. Why not also for databases with smaller sizes?" Two reasons. One is it's harder to set up than conventional native backups are. Two, if you've got smaller databases, you generally have lots of them. You generally have a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, or more. And snapshot databases, Microsoft only recommends that you snapshot, and I forget if the number's 30 or 35 databases at the same time, and all the databases on the same volume have to be snapshotted at the same time. So often that's where you run into problems. Next up, Miles says, "How do you handle egoistic managers or toxic peers who take credit for your work, don't appreciate it, and hinder your promotion despite hard work? Have you faced such situations?" Yes, I have actually. Can you share your experiences and advice on dealing with them? Now, so that it's a kind of a big question because there's a couple parts broken up, managers and employees. When you're dealing with employees, the best thing that you can do is communicate. You want to learn. There's a great saying in careers: do good things and tell people. You have to do both of those to be successful. You can't just do good things. You can't just, I got to be careful about which finger I put up there. Let's try these two. Do good things and tell people. You can't just do good things and not tell anybody. You can't tell people you're doing good things and not actually do the work. You have to do both of them. And as hard as you work at your technical side, you also have to work that much on the communication side. Welcome to adulthood. I know it kind of sucks. So the thing that I would tell you is start getting as much information as you can about working with people, communicating with people, convincing people of things. Just like you've been spending so much time working technically, you need to do that with the soft skills as well. When it comes to managers, I would give you one other piece of advice. You are probably not going to change your manager's behavior. You're probably not going to be able to change your manager's behavior. So if you don't like your manager's behavior, you're probably going to be better off switching jobs rather than trying to mold your manager. Hope that helps. Next up, Unspoiled asks, "I had an issue," Unspoiled, like virgin forests in Alaska, "had an issue with excessive blocking. I tracked this down related to compile locks, which I've never heard of before." Yeah. How do compile locks cause widespread blocking issues, and how could it be prevented? So the first thing that you want to think about is you want to compile queries as least often as possible. Microsoft has guidelines, and I want to say it's for transactional workloads that less than 10% of your queries should be compiling. They should already have an execution plan up in cache. So the first thing to be aware of is that you want to make sure that you're getting reusable execution plans. You don't want to do things like option recompile if you can avoid it. You don't want to be building dynamic strings that have parameter values hard-coded inside of them. You want to be able to quickly see a query and be able to have an execution plan already ready to go. The other part to that is you need to make sure that those execution plans that are cached in memory aren't getting invalidated for some reason, like someone's doing frequent index rebuilds or statistics updates during the day. If you're doing that, it's time to ease off. If you have an object whose stats are changing all the time, you may need to look into that. Q tables are a classic example. And in order to head off that problem, you can set the stats on that table to not update automatically. You can get one good set of stats and then just turn off recompute. This is a really big issue. I don't have a class on it. I don't have a training class on it. In Mastering Server Tuning, we talk about how to maximize your plan cache and make it as effective as possible. But the problem with compile locks is fairly rare. It's fairly unusual to see, and that's why you're not finding a lot of good information about it. Hopefully that short piece there gets you started enough where you can go through a journey, because of course I don't know what your skill levels are. This is the kind of thing that often people will hire a consultant for if it's happening frequently. If it just happened once, you can kind of stick it away and go, wow, I dodged that emergency. But if it's hitting you all the time, that's where you may want to hire a consultant to help. Next up, Blue K says, is Azure SQL any better or worse for implementing one database per customer instead of a traditional SQL VM? For me, it's way easier for a few reasons. One is cost control. If you put each customer in its own SQL server, its own Azure SQL DB, you can identify exactly how much that customer is costing you. And if you have someone who wants super high performance, you can let them buy into a higher performance tier. You can say this one database is we're going to dedicate a whole lot higher Azure SQL DB size to it, CPU cores, memory, etc. So it's very easy to do that kind of fine-grained cost control. Another thing that it's easier for is high availability and disaster recovery. It is generally easier to have Microsoft do that high availability and disaster recovery for you. When you get to the point where you have hundreds or thousands of databases, that is a giant pain in the rear with traditional VMs. Log shipping is harder. Availability groups is damn near impossible. So for me, I love Azure SQL DB for that stuff. Next up, Kesar asks, you mentioned using snapshot backups instead of native SQL backups for multi-terabyte databases. Do you recommend first upgrading to SQL Server 2022 before attempting snapshot backups? No, not at all. There was an improvement in SQL Server 2022 that lets you start snapshot backups with T-SQL. You don't need it. That's for a very specialized subset of customers who are trying to roll things themselves. You want to use your SAN snapshot vendor or your SAN vendor's snapshot backups, and they don't need that 2022 feature. Next up, Chips Ahoy says, in a recent office hours, you recommended that XML and JSON be stored in the database as a blob. Oh, dude, you're copy pasting this question. I've already answered it like 3 times. You're also known to say don't put data in the database unless there will be joins or filters on it. You're not hearing me, and you're not watching the past office hours videos, so I'm going to say this one more time, and the next time I see it, I'm going to ban you for life from office hours just because I'm tired of you copy pasting this question in. The idea here is that if you have to put it in the database, then put it in a blob. I don't want people querying it relationally. But I would rather you not put it in the database at all. Put files in a file server. And Chips Ahoy, that'll be the last time I let you ask that question. Next up, Red U says, have you seen anyone successfully automate scale up and scale down processes for Azure SQL VMs, and what were the lessons learned? Yes, I've had several clients now do that. And the thing is it requires really a developer level mentality. It's left up to you to build the monitoring to figure out when you want to do it, what trips those thresholds. It's up to you to figure out how big of a jump you need to make. It's up to you to figure out how you're going to deal with the downtime, because often resizing causes downtime, whether it's going up or going down. one of the clients that I do has every set of databases in an availability group with 5 nodes in it. And so whenever they want to make a capacity change, they automatically kill one of the VMs. They spin up a much larger VM in its place. They get the databases automatically restored, joined to the availability group, and then they fail over to that much larger node. So they have like a 30 to 60 second downtime window in order to fail up to it. You don't want to take a 30 to 60 second downtime window if you're already having performance problems. That's going to be problematic for you. So what that company likes to do is they like to trend on weekdays, like business hours, weekdays versus weekends and so forth, to see when their CPU, lock bottlenecks, whatever it is, start to become higher. And before they actually need it, they'll say, all right, starting next week, we're going to go with a 50% higher size on this box. And then they have a scheduled maintenance time on, say, Saturday nights where this automation will take place, but they just never automate it, or they never make the changes while it's actually happening. They just watch and then make adjustments over time. The biggest lesson learned by far is that it takes staff in order to do this kinds of automation. It takes a lot of staff and a lot of testing because you don't want this stuff to misfire. So obviously you would only want to do this when you have hundreds of SQL servers that are all costing you a fortune. Then in those cases, the additional staff required and processes, change control and all that actually save you money over the long term. Next up, let's see here. Izzy asks, what are the top issues that your clients run into when querying SQL Server over a WAN instead of a LAN? Latency. The further that you are from the SQL Server, the longer that your queries will take. All right, doesn't seem like rocket surgery there, does it? Next up, It's a Me asks, hi Brent, you talk about backups a lot, but I've never heard you mention backing up to URL. Is there a reason that you don't mention it as an option? The biggest reason by far is that most of the clients that I deal with couldn't use it at the times that it came out. For example, when it first came out in like SQL Server 2012, I think it was, or 2014, it only supported backing up to Azure blobs. And at the time, like 95% of my clients were in Amazon. And so they're like, why would I want to back up cross cloud? That doesn't do me any good. And the clients that I had were still on premises. The clients that I had that were still on premises did not want to back up straight to Azure either. It would have just taken too long, would have made their backups too slow. So when it came out in, I forget if it was 2019 or 2022, I think it might have been 2022 that they finally supported Amazon S3. I don't have a lot of clients who are engineering new backup solutions in the year 2022. Backups are pretty much a solved problem at this point. If you needed to back up to the cloud, you've already figured out a solution for that. So that's why I don't talk about it much. Let's see here. We got all kinds of things happening over in the chat here. Let's see. Drop table. Okay, looks like. All right. Okay, cool. So I think we're okay there. I think folks are just chatting. Which is fine. Next up, Farouk says, is the query store purely a logging feature, or does SQL Server also use it to check plans for reuse plans or check plans to help with query execution? Farouk, there's great documentation on Query Store. So if you search for SQL Server Query Store documentation, there's a ton of information about it. By all means, you should go check that out because it sounds like you're just getting started with your journey on it. Query Store is one of those features that can backfire hard, so you need to read the documentation. So rather than giving you a fish, I'm going to teach you how to go fish. Go Google for SQL Server Query Store documentation, and you're going to find a ton of information on basic questions like that. Next up, Grubsnick says, in recent office hours, you mentioned that SQL Server has become much better at prioritizing RAM over disk for TempDB for the last 5-10 years. It's actually been since SQL Server 2012, so for like 11 years now. Can you tell which version specifically? Oh, I just did, SQL Server 2012. We've been running TempDB on RAM drives, and I'm wondering if that's an anti-pattern for SQL Server 2016. Yes, you should not be doing that in the year 2023. Put your RAM drives away. Your grandpa thought that was really cool back when he was trying to run things on his Commodore 64. In the year 2023, use SQL Server's RAM to cache data. It's a much better solution. Doug says, what are your thoughts on Microsoft purchasing Activision? I have no idea. I will say that for a long time, Microsoft has made acquisitions, and I've kind of been like, what the? And then all of a sudden, for like the last 5 years, 10 years maybe, they've been on fire. They bought LinkedIn, they bought GitHub, they bought Minecraft. They've made so many smart decisions being in the right place. Now, they spent a lot of money, but being in the right place at the right time. So I would never second guess them. I think whatever they're doing over there about big acquisitions seems pretty smart. Drop table employee says Call of Duty will run on Azure now. Yeah, exactly. You'll be playing against Chat GPT players. Sandy says, what is a good way to identify queries that pose a risk of a sudden change in execution plan? Instead of looking for queries that might have a problem someday, focus on the queries that are causing you problems right now. I see this so often with database administrators. They're like, I wonder if I could find a possible potential issue with queries that might damage the rainforest. And meanwhile, the users are screaming, beating on the door, this query's slow. And they're like, yeah, but I'm more interested in saving the planet, or whatever it is that their current focus is. Go talk to your users. Go look at the top resource using queries right now and start solving those problems. Now, if you do want to do this, the thing that you're asking about, I do cover how to do it in Mastering Parameter Sniffing. In the Mastering Parameter Sniffing class, I give you tools to understand when it's happening, how to go gather the plans for it, how to go gather the specific parameters that are involved with those queries, and much more. Shane says, Brent's killing my hero daydreams. I know, especially because a lot of us have hero daydreams because we got started working in things like tech support or dealing with end user queries, doing triage as developers, emergency support calls. So we love being the hero, but it just doesn't work very well once you start becoming a database administrator. Let's see here. We'll do one more. Lance asks, Lance Boyle. Oh, that's good. Lance asks, what is your favorite cruise ship line and destination? I'd have to say my favorite cruise line is Celebrity because I think they have the best food and the best art on board the ships, and their ships feel really modern. They have modern decor in the ships. They feel really nice. I hear really great things from my rich friends about Ritz-Carlton's ships, but I looked at the prices and I was like, you are out of your mind. It was like $25,000 for a 1-week cruise. And I was like, you are out of your mind. So I'd say Celebrity is the one that I like the most. However, they tend to be a little bit on the expensive side, so Princess tends to be the one that I take more often. It's full of old retired people, so if you're looking for something with a lot of activities, it's not really going to be your bag. But because I like sitting back in a nice quiet ship and reading, then it's a great cruise line for me. My favorite destination would be Alaska. I love cruising Alaska. I've been there probably 10 or 15 times. Love it. I keep going back over and over again. There was a point in my life where I would get off an Alaskan cruise and I would be like, okay, I don't need to do that again. But then over time, I'm like, no, I actually want to go through and see the exact same sites again. It's very inspiring. A friend of ours is actually on an Alaskan cruise right now, so I've been watching their Instagram and just going, "Oh, I know exactly where that's at. I know where that bear watching spot is at," and it makes me eager to go back. Yeah, Iceland and Sweden and Norway is going to give me that fix in the next few weeks, but then I would expect that next summer I'll be right back in Alaska again. All right, so there we go. That is a good half hour of live questions. That is going to be it for this summer. That's a wrap for I've been doing office hours twice a week the entire summer because I knew I was going to be home most of the summer. I didn't have a whole lot of travel plans. I actually thought I was going to be hanging out in the brand new backyard. I thought it was going to be done and I would be hanging out in the backyard, kind of enjoying a staycation. And it's still not done. I talked to the Proficient Patios, the company that's doing it, yesterday. Yesterday they told me they were like, "Hey, a plumber is coming to work on the waterfall tomorrow, just as a heads up." And I said, "Okay, great. Can you tell me the status of the hot tub and the side gate too as well?" And the woman's like, "No, no, no, the plumber's not doing that." And I'm like, "I know. Someone needs to do them." I have a hot tub that's been sitting in a warehouse for over a year, in their warehouse for over a year, that they need to come deliver to me. I'm like waiting. I'd like to use the hot tub. And the side gate, they blew down the side gate so that they could bring the hot tub in. So as a result, our dog has not been able to go out and use the doggy door for the last year. We've had to take him on walks continuously. I'm like, come on, make it happen. Sequel Joy, welcome to your first time chat there. You're welcome for hanging out at office hours. Default Blame Acceptor says, thanks for your time and importing your knowledge in our direction. My pleasure, absolutely. Drop Table employees enjoy the MSC cruises. I hear really good things about their food. I hear really good things about MSC's food on board the ships. Chiton says, I've been on MSC 3 times now from Durban, South Africa to the Portuguese islands, Mozambique. Now looking for something new, like from Wales to the North Pole. North Pole's really hard. That's a challenging one to get to. South Pole, if you look at Antarctica cruises, there are actually a lot more of those. You fly over to South America, you board the ship there, and then it's like a 1 week or 2 week cruise from South Africa or South America down around some of the islands in the Antarctic and then back up. So that would be the thing I would go for. True pole places or true pole ventures where you actually walk to the pole itself, those tend to be really expensive. I know because I was super interested. I still am super interested in doing it too, but I want to say for 2 people, it was like $50,000. And by yourself, if it's because all the cruises are done by pairs, you end up paying 50 grand even for one person. Shane says, "Sounds like you have a spontaneous ornament instead of a hot tub." We have a lot of oddball things in the backyard. Renegade says, "Are you making a stop in Denmark on your vacation?" Nope. My dance card is full, just trying to hit Iceland, Norway, and Sweden inside the span of 3 weeks. That's about as full as I can possibly get. It's so funny. I get clients will see, "Oh, you're going to such and such place. Can you just make a 1 day detour?" And I'm like, nope. By the time that I plan the trip, it's already 100% packed with between my personal time and the conference times and all that I'm like, I can't add any more. And I always say, if you want me to come, you can add more time onto the beginning or end of the vacation, but you're going to be responsible for the full travel cost. And then they're like, oh, yeah, no, maybe not so much. Sequel Pilot says, "My wife gets motion sickness real bad, so I'll never be going on a cruise, at least not with her." I would recommend Dramamine. Dramamine works really well. You just have to know that you can't drink when you do that kind of thing. It makes you sleepy. There's non-drowsy ones. They still make you sleepy, but they do work. I had a friend who was horrifically motion sick and just popped Dramamine continuously and did totally just fine. The DBA says, or Default Blame Acceptor says, the patch, scopolamine, I think it's called. But again, that works totally as well. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. I will be recording office hours in Iceland next week. I fly in like 3 days. So I will see y'all asynchronously over the next few weeks. Adios, y'all.